Hello, hello. This is John with Gringo.dev. Wanted to follow up on the video series that I started earlier this week. You can go back and watch the first episode, but the basic idea is that I'm bringing together two of my passions. One of those is Stoic philosophy, and the other, of course, is building cool code. And so the idea here is that I'm going to be open sourcing, building in public a project to do both. I'm going to be narrating and recording works of classic Stoic philosophy and then building a platform to distribute those to anybody who might be interested, even though the primary audience is just me. It's my way of getting closer to the source material and like really understanding it and being able to apply it to my life. But my hope is somebody else finds it and finds it useful. And also that we have a good chance to have dialogue back and forth to learn about new technologies. And as I have features that I want to add, I can add them and teach the community best practices and then hopefully learn from the community too. So the idea is that we all learn together. So let's take a look here. Visually, everything is pretty similar to before, but you can see a couple of changes. So one is I have a dashboard now. And so I basically re-enabled user registration, which I had turned off before. You get that for free through Laravel starter packs. And I have added the ability to like or save episodes, as well as unsave. So you can see here that I can do that. So if you're not logged in, by the way, this will say sign up, sign in, and you can follow that flow. Same thing happens if you click the empty heart and you're not logged in. But you can see here if I go to my dashboard, that was a very fast transition, by the way. So that's Livewire's new spa mode using Wire Navigate. So very fast load time, feels very spa-like. So I don't have any favorites. I can go back. I can add a couple. And now you can see that they show up here. Then it's reactive. If I remove one, it goes away too. And if I go back, because it's the back button, the state isn't refreshed. But you can see that indeed that did get synchronized with the back end. So that's all cool and surprisingly easy to do. So let me show you how all that works. If you click here on the GitHub button, it takes you to the repo, which again is all open source. So if you go into the commits, the most recent one as of now is add user accounts and favorites. And in the future, I think I'm going to tie the commit messages to the videos. So it's easier to tie them back together. But in any case, you can find this. The first thing is the migration for the new model. Of course, we had to add a new table to represent the favorites. And so it's just a basic join table. We already had users, we already had episodes, and so now we have favorite episodes to represent the relationship between the user and the episode, and we call that a favorite. And we're enforcing uniqueness at the SQL level between a user and an episode. So nothing too interesting there. Same for the model, same for the policy, right, for permissions. But if we go to the index, this is the home page. And so not much to call out here other than just, look how easy it is to do something that at one point in time actually was very easy. I mean, back in the day, server-side rendering, the good old stuff, right? So I just know because I'm in my backend at the point that I'm doing the template that somebody's logged in or not, and I can just render the correct button. And sometimes I am astonished at how difficult it is to do those things in the latest and greatest technology where, we've gone so far down the path of optimizing certain things that it's being rendered server-side for part of the cycle and then being rendered client-side for part of it. And, sometimes you don't have access to data. Other times you have to use a use effect. It's just so simple and so nice, right? But anyway, I won't rant too much about that. So the dashboard is where we start seeing some interesting code a little bit more. And so first thing to call out, Laravel Folio, which is file-based routing, went V1 today, and so did Laravel Volt. And Volt is the single file components for Livewire. So if you were holding off because they were beta before, they're now officially stable V1s. And also Livewire itself reached stable V3 today, and so did Filament, the admin panel, reached stable V3. So a lot of cool stuff dropped today, and a lot of the files that you see in this commit, by the way, are just updating the dependencies to reflect that. But this is nice because it demonstrates a lot, but it's also a simple component. So first thing is we have a query here to find all of the favorites for a user. And so we're just querying that join table to look for a user ID that matches the ID on the current session. You can do things like this because, again, this is all back-end code. It lives right next to your front-end templating language, but it runs in the backend, right? And so you can get your favorite episodes. It goes in a computed property, and that is a Livewire optimization to avoid recomputing things like database queries so frequently. And so this becomes this favorite episodes when you're in the template or in enclosures. And then here, in the other component, I'm going to show how I omit this event. But I listen for the favorite removed event, and then I unset this computed property when I receive it. And that's to make sure that the list of tiles there reflects the current state in the database. If I didn't have this, what could happen is I end up in a situation where I'm getting a 404 or something like that from Livewire. And so it's worth spending a little second on how that stuff works. This is something that I just learned over like maybe the last day. And so the first time through, when it caches the value of this, Livewire might serialize the model that it gets back, and it says, okay, I found a favorite. It has ID of 17 or whatever. And then when it needs to get the latest state, it's reaching out directly to the query, to that model rather, to try and get the latest data for that favorite. In the case where you're unfavoriting something, which means that you might be deleting it from the database, that model no longer exists. And so what you actually want to happen is for this closure that's past the computed property to get recomputed again. And so the way that you do that is you unset it. This is just a PHP construct to unset the key. And then once it's unset, Livewire knows to go through and rerun the entire calculation from scratch. And so in this case, that would mean that you run this query again, and maybe you discover that in your list of favorite episodes, that favorite is no longer there, and you can get the titles that you need. So that's basically what we're doing. Nothing too fancy. You can look at the code, but we just have the episode tiles rendered from the list of favorites, and then we have some fallback content if there are none. So some of the more complex changes were here, and this is in the episode tile, which we use on the homepage as well as in the dashboard. So this is the episode tile component. And so you can do a few things here. You can download, you can favorite, you can unfavorite, right? So we have all of the actions and everything to make that possible. So you have the query here, which I'm computing, and that's just the query to find the favorite for that user in that episode. It should always return 1 or 0. And we get the favorite back by running a dependent computed property that takes the query and gets the first, also a Boolean to see if anything exists for that query. And so we use both of those for different purposes. Then we have some Livewire actions here. Download file stayed exactly the same. Add favorite and remove favorite are new. And so again, these are just backend code, like backend functions that you can run in response to front-end events. And so you can see here, I'm able to do anything that I would normally do in a Laravel controller. Again, it's just backend stuff. So I can check to see if somebody is logged in and conditionally redirect. I can check to see if they're authorized to create a favorite in this case and respond appropriately. And then ultimately, I can create the favorite and then dispatch an event to let any other consumers know that a favorite has been added. And then on the flip side, right, I can authorize that this user can indeed delete this favorite, remove this favorite, and then run the delete statement through SQL. Again, for the same reasons that I went through earlier, unset the favorite episode computed property so that gets recomputed, and then dispatch the favorite removed event. And from here, we have all of the templating code. The most interesting stuff to go through here is probably the optimistic updating. So what do I mean by optimistic updating? It's a technique in front end where, depending on exactly what the case is, if you have to wait on a network request for something to happen, you have some choices on how you represent that to the user. Kind of the most standard thing to do is a spinner, right? So you communicate that something is happening and that you're waiting, and at the end you communicate the result. You also have the choice of doing an optimistic update, which is whatever the user was trying to do, you just assume that it's going to succeed and you communicate that status immediately. And then after the fact, maybe you have to communicate it didn't happen. So like a like on YouTube, for example, which everybody should do, or a comment or a subscribe, is the kind of thing that would be perhaps well represented by an optimistic update. And so in the case of a favorite, that would be something like painting in the color, even though the network has not yet responded on the request. And so you can see that's kind of what I'm doing here. I basically have two hearts that I can paint in the UI. And so the first one shows up if the episode is already favorited. And so you can see here that wire loading is a little helper that says that when this action, and remember it's called add favorite, when this is running, add this class, this CSS class, to the element. So I'm saying that while we're waiting on add favorite, we add fill red 500. So that fills it in while the network request is pending. And then as soon as the network request is finished, then we switch to the other one. So, the logic here is basically, depending on what the backend thinks about whether an episode is favorited or not favorited, we choose which of these things to render in the initial paint of the page. And then we have the wire loading, wire target helpers, which help us with that intermediate state when we're waiting on the network request to finish. And so you can see on the opposite end, if I'm waiting on the remove favorite action, then I temporarily remove fill red 500 on the assumption that that action is actually going to succeed. And so the nice part about this approach is that, in the 99.9% case where everything goes fine and the action does succeed, you're communicating it like that. It's an instantaneous change that you can communicate to your user. But in the case where it doesn't go as planned, by default, if you do nothing else, after the next synchronization with the backend, the action that did not take place, let's say, for example, you were trying to favorite something and it didn't go through, when Livewire comes back and synchronizes state, in the UI, you might see the heart fill up for, let's say half a second. And then when the request comes back, it'll be unfilled again because, in fact, the server state did not reflect that happened. So there are trade-offs in that approach, right? Like the safer thing to do would probably be a spinner, but I wanted to demonstrate what this would look like. And it is indeed very slick and very fast in the front end. And I think I covered this last time, but same as before, like if you have something that's purely client-side, like there's no server-side state at all, you can use Alpine.js for that. And that was the case where I just wanted to show, or I guess expand or contract the teaser for the transcript. And so this is purely client-side state, and Alpine is great for that. I mean, we just have a very simple Boolean here that we can toggle in response to an event, and it's reactive. So all that's very nice, and works very well. I think the only gotcha that I had in this entire process was just the unset thing as far as computed properties. And then also what may in fact be a small bug around the for else blade directive that I need to look into more. But by and large, just look at the elegance, the simplicity of all of this. Here we have a component that's not even 100 lines. We can do adding and removing favorites. We can download files. We're doing all of our authorization checks, redirecting when needed, things like that. We have function composition. We can use components in different places if we need to, like everything else. It's I don't know the right way to phrase it, but it feels like a superpower sometimes to have your backend feel like it's this close to your front end, even though fundamentally it's an illusion. Like all of this wire stuff that you're seeing here is just invoking what I understand to be Alpine.js helpers under the hood, right? But bottom line, as a developer, it doesn't matter that much. Like from my perspective, I can write backend code, and in response to events, it gets called. I don't have to write an API. I don't have to do anything. It just invokes my backend code, and I can do whatever I want. And it gets extra powerful in combination with Laravel Folio, Laravel Bold, stuff like this. So it's like all of a sudden you can get things that feel like the idea behind React server components, except they also feel much more mature and like they actually work. And you don't have these weird leaky abstractions so much on everything. So that's kind of my take on it. So far, I'm a fan. But I'm going to tell you guys when and if that changes. It took me a little bit to get my head wrapped around how computed properties work, how updates work, DOM diffing work, stuff like that. So there's a little bit of a learning curve with Livewire, but man, once you get the hang of it, it's possible to do some cool things real fast. So anyway, that's it for today. Again, you can go back to stoic.gringo.dev. Check out the new episode that just dropped today. This is the Meditations, Book 3, 1 through 10. If you like anything about this, please like, please subscribe, please comment. I don't do any of this for money. It's just to hopefully help people. I find making the videos fun, and the bigger the community is and the more interactions I get, the more fun it is for me. So anyway, any feedback, comments, anything is appreciated. Please stay tuned. There's going to be an episode 3 of this before too long, and I will see you guys next time.